Chris Jones just fired a shot across the bow, publicly calling for the Chiefs to bring back Mike Pennel to fix their shaky defensive line. With run defense leaking yards and injuries piling up, is this low-cost veteran the plug-and-play savior for another title run? We break down the pros, cons, and if Brett Veach pulls the trigger before the deadline. Stay tuned, Chiefs Kingdom. Alright, here's the deal. The trade deadline is coming up, and right now the Chiefs have a genuine chance to shore up one obvious weakness: the interior of the defensive line. On paper, this front looks deep. Chris Jones anchoring the middle, some high-draft rookie talent, and veterans sprinkled in, but the real game tape tells a different story. The run defense has been serviceable, not elite, and the gaps in short yardage situations keep showing up at the worst possible times. That's why Chris Jones's recent comments about bringing a familiar face back hit like a splash of cold water. He called for Mike Pennel, and not just for the on-field snaps. Jones explicitly praised Pennel as a heck of a locker room guy and said he'd love to get him back in Kansas City. That quote tells you two things. 1. Jones trusts Pennel's personality and fit. And 2. Leadership and culture value matter in the mix when teams add veterans at the deadline. So right now, the question for the Chiefs front office is simple. Do you prioritize short-term proven interior toughness, a plug-and-play veteran who helps on early downs, or double down on long-term development with the younger guys? In this piece, we're going to break down both sides. We'll look at what this enviable defensive line actually has, why it's been underperforming in key areas, who Mike Pennel is and what he brings, whether a reunion is realistic logistically, and finally, a clear verdict. So, you know what I'd do if I were Brett Veach. If you're enjoying this breakdown so far, please hit that like button and subscribe. We're pushing to hit 6,000 subscribers, and every new subscriber helps us cover more trade deadline moves live. Let's get into what this Chiefs defensive line really is and what it isn't right now. On paper, this front looks like it should dominate. You've got Chris Jones, a Hall of Fame level player who's been the anchor of this defense for years, plus George Karlaftis, Charles Omenihu, and a couple of promising young guys like Derrick Nnadi and Neil Farrell. Add in that first and third round draft capital they spent to strengthen the trenches, and you'd expect chaos for opposing offenses. But in reality, the performance hasn't matched the expectation. This line has flashed potential in spurts, but overall it's been underwhelming. The Chiefs rank middle of the pack in rushing yards allowed. Not terrible, but not the kind of dominance we expect from a team that wants to repeat. For a defense this talented and this expensive, average isn't good enough, especially when Kansas City relies on the defense to flip field position for Patrick Mahomes. You can't do that if you're losing first downs on the ground. Why does the group feel like it's missing something? Part of it is injuries. Derrick Nnadi's ankle and rookie growing pains have slowed some of the development. Part of it is inconsistency. Veterans who disappear on certain downs and younger pieces who haven't fully learned gap discipline. And part of it is chemistry. This front has the talent, but it hasn't clicked into that synchronized gap-dominating rhythm that elite fronts show every week. Chris Jones still does his thing, double-teamed constantly, collapsing pockets and forcing quarterbacks into uncomfortable throws. But when Jones is neutralized or double-teamed, the rest of the line often fails to take advantage. That lack of complementary interior pressure is the missing ingredient that turns good fronts into great ones. To be fair, there's an upward trend. You're seeing flashes from Omenihu and from the younger guys. But flashes won't cut it when the schedule tightens and playoff football arrives. That's exactly where a player like Mike Pennel could make an instant difference. He's not the guy chasing sacks or highlight reels. He's the guy who eats double teams and frees his teammates to make plays. When Pennel's in the middle, Jones doesn't have to overextend or count himself into the ground. That balance often translates to efficiency across the board. Now, let's talk about the man in the middle of this whole conversation. Mike Pennel. If you've followed the Chiefs, that name isn't new. Pennel has worn the red and gold before. He's been part of championship runs and locker rooms that know how to win in January and February. That kind of experience isn't something you can draft overnight. Pennel entered the league in 2014 and fought his way onto rosters the hard way. Grit, size, and a relentless motor that made coaches trust him on early downs. He's not flashy. He's a 6 feet 4 inches, roughly 330 pounds. Trench guy who wins with leverage and burst at the point of attack. Over his career, he's logged a solid number of tackles and tackles for loss. Numbers that don't jump off highlight reels, but represent consistent production in his role. When Pennel's on the field, the run game stiffens. Linebackers play faster because they're not fighting through double teams, safeties can stay back, and the secondary plays with less stress. That ripple effect is exactly what Kansas City has been missing. Plus, he knows this defense. He's played next to Chris Jones and in Steve Spagnuolo's system. That means his learning curve would be short. Plug him in and get value quickly. That kind of immediate impact is rare for mid-season additions. Beyond on-field skills, Pennel brings veteran presence. He's a leadership type whose voice matters behind closed doors. Chris Jones didn't call him a heck of a locker room guy for nothing. When your top player publicly campaigns to bring a teammate back, it tells you that players' value goes beyond the stat sheet. There's also a human side. Pennel's bounced in and out of Kansas City multiple times, cut in camp, re-signed later, moved between squads. That's tough on a player and raises a question. Would he want to come back after all that churn? Some players would, some wouldn't. But if he does come back, locker room chemistry suggests he'd be welcomed like family. If Pennel does return, whose snaps should he take? Derrick Nnadi's or a rookie's? That's a debate for the coaches. I want to hear your take. Drop which player's snaps you'd give him in the comments. Now for the logistics. Is bringing Pennel back realistic? It's one thing for Chris Jones to drop a name in the press and for fans to get excited. It's another for Brett Veach and the front office to make it happen. The NFL trade deadline is a complicated puzzle of contracts, roster spots, cap space, and timing. Let's unpack what's in play. Pennel's recent track record shows he's been bouncing around practice squads and short-term deals. That works in Kansas City's favor. If he's a free agent, the Chiefs could sign him outright without giving up draft capital. If another team holds his rights, the cost would likely be minimal. Maybe a conditional late pick. This isn't a blockbuster. It's a low-cost, potentially high-reward move. Cap-wise, signing a veteran like Pennel near the league minimum is manageable. The Chiefs aren't swimming in cap space, but this particular move wouldn't move the needle much. The bigger hurdle is roster math. Who do you cut? Do you move on from a struggling veteran like Nnadi? Do you shuffle a rookie to the practice squad? Those are painful but realistic roster decisions teams make at the deadline. Timing matters, too. Adding a veteran mid-season means they need to relearn the playbook and get into game shape quickly. But Pennel's advantage is familiarity. He's done this before in this system. So the ramp-up period would likely be short, maybe a week or two. Does Brett Veach actually pull the trigger? Hard to say, but Veach has shown he's willing to be aggressive when there's a clear need. He's brought back familiar faces and made low-risk moves that paid off before. Logistically, it's very possible. The bigger question is whether the Chiefs view it as necessary. Are they confident enough in their young pieces to ride the upward trend, or do they want a low-cost veteran to stabilize the unit heading into the playoff push? Here's my verdict. If the Chiefs want to stay elite and keep the championship window open, bringing Pennel makes a lot of sense. He won't fill stat sheets, but he brings toughness, gap control, and knowledge of the system. When he's in the middle, opposing teams can't simply run it down your throat. That matters more than flashy plays when the weather gets cold and the games get physical. There's a downside, roster space. You'd have to part ways with someone, maybe a veteran on the roster or a younger developmental piece. But when you're choosing between potential and production in January, production tends to win that argument. And when your defensive leader is publicly asking for reinforcements, that carries weight. Jones is the emotional heartbeat of that defense. If he wants a teammate who helps in February, you at least owe it to the locker room to consider it seriously. So if I'm Brett Veach, I make the call. Bring Mike Pennel back. Let him anchor the interior and give the defense another veteran piece to chase history. But that's my take. I want to hear yours, Chiefs Kingdom. Should Veach pull the trigger before the deadline? Drop your thoughts below. I'm reading every single one. If you enjoyed this deep dive, not just headlines, but real roster and scheme talk, do your part for the kingdom. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this with another fan who bleeds red and gold. Help us push to 6,000 subscribers so we can keep breaking down every trade and roster move. Thanks for watching. This is Total Chiefs News. We'll see you in the next one.